Of the many items that make boating as we know it possible, batteries are arguably the most important. Although these boxes of lead and acid grant us access to all the wonders of modern electronic gadgetry, most boaters know little about them and even less about proper selection and maintenance. It's a sad fact batteries rarely die a natural death. Most are homicide victims killed by unwitting owners. Here's the first of a two-part article on how to select, install, and properly maintain your batteries so they live to a ripe old age. Contrary to popular belief, batteries are not a modern invention. A clay jar found near modern-day Baghdad is thought to be the oldest known electric battery in existence. Dated to around 200 BC, this 5.5-inch by 3-inch wide Baghdad battery was capable, when filled with an electrolyte, probably vinegar or fermented grape juice, of generating between 1.5 and 2 volts. Theories for its use range from treating pain — the Greeks and Romans used electric fish to numb painful areas — to electroplating silver objects with gold. But what exactly is a battery? Simply put, they're devices that convert chemical energy into electricity via a galvanic cell, which is formed by suspending two dissimilar metal plates within an electrolyte. A common flashlight battery would be an example of a single-cell battery, whereas the familiar 12-volt lead-acid battery consists of 6 cells, each of around 2.1 volts when charged, connected in series. Once surrounded by electrolyte, an electrical voltage develops between the plates, the amount of which varies depending on the types of metal used and the electrolyte itself. Lead-acid batteries, the focus of this article, consist of a sulfuric acid electrolyte and plates of lead dioxide and sponge lead, thus the name lead-acid. Battery lingo. Battery selection in a perfect world would focus exclusively on meeting a vessel's electrical needs under any circumstances. In the real world, however, factors such as cost, availability, mounting space, and intended use all play equally important roles in the selection process. Before discussing the various types of batteries available, let's review a few terms that will aid you in selecting the one that's right for you. First up, cold cranking amps, often abbreviated as CCA. CCA is defined as the maximum number of amps a new fully charged 12-volt battery can deliver at 0 degrees Fahrenheit for 30 seconds while maintaining a voltage of at least 7.2 volts. That's 1.2 volts per cell. Marine cranking amps, or MCA, also known as cranking performance. MCA is a term used to rate how much cranking power a new, fully charged 12-volt battery provides at 32 degrees Fahrenheit for 30 seconds while maintaining at least 7.2 volts, 1.2 volts per cell. Amp hours, also abbreviated as AH. Amp hours expresses a battery's storage capacity, and it's determined by multiplying current draw in amps by the length of time in hours that it takes a battery to discharge. A battery capable of providing 5 amps for 20 hours, 5 amps times 20 hours, would have 100 amp hours of capacity, as would one that delivers 4 amps for 25 hours. The rate and discharge time can vary, however, the battery's electrical storage capacity remains the same. Reserve capacity, or RC. The reserve capacity of a battery is the number of minutes it can supply a constant specified voltage, normally 25 amps, at 80 degrees Fahrenheit while maintaining at least 10.5 volts. It's designed to give the buyer an idea of how long a battery can continue to supply power to essential accessories after a charging system failure. A terrestrial example being how far an automobile can be driven after the alternator fails or the alternator belt breaks. 20-hour rating. The 20-hour rating states that the amperage of a new fully charged battery can supply for 20 hours at a temperature of 80 degrees Fahrenheit. This is also known as the amp hour capacity of a battery. Last up, cycle life. The cycle life is the number of discharge and charge cycles a battery can deliver over its service life. One battery cycle is defined as discharge from a full charge to a complete discharge, and then back to a usable full charge again. usually from 100% to 20% and then back to 100%, although the percentage of discharge varies between ratings. So, what's it all mean? Well, for starters, the burden is on you, the consumer, to ensure that the playing field is level when comparing and contrasting the various ratings used when advertising. Battery manufacturers are a crafty lot, and you have to pay attention to not only what they're selling, but how they're selling it. For example, let's say we got two batteries, battery A and battery B. Battery A offers 900 cold cranking amps for $100. While battery B offers 900 marine cranking amps for $75. As both provide the same amperage, B appears to be the better value initially, but the informed buyer, that'd be you now after you listen to my articles, knows that the MCA is a rating performed at 32 degrees Fahrenheit, while CCA uses 0 degrees as a reference point. Any battery will have a higher MCA than CCA. As battery performance degrades with lower temperatures, if battery B provides the same amps at 0 degrees that battery A does at 32 degrees, we can assume it's likely a stronger, more robust product. Manufacturers may also use different discharge periods to generate higher amp hour numbers for their product. For example, a battery can have a 20-hour rate of 344 amp hours, as well as a 100-hour rate of 429 amp hours. It's easy to see how buyers comparing two batteries with similar capacities but different hour rates would logically assume that the one with the higher amp hours is more powerful, unless they're aware of these key differences in hour rates. Know your type. So what's the best way to select the right battery? Start by looking at what the battery's job will be once it's installed, which allows you to select it based on both application, is it a starting battery or a storage battery, and construction. And this will be you looking at the design of it, the materials, quality materials, etc. Probably the first decision to be made is whether to go with a wet cell battery or one of the newer technologies such as gel cell or AGM. These are the most common basic battery types and probably account for 90% of the batteries on the market. Now, the newer battery, more advanced battery systems such as lithium ion and stuff, that's going to be a topic of discussion for another article, a future article. So, just to clarify, we're going to be talking about wet cell technology now, gel cell, AGM, and just plain old wet cell batteries. All wet cell, gel cell, and AGM styles are lead acid batteries in one form or another, meaning they all use the same chemistry despite variations in construction, and each can be designed for starting battery or storage applications. Familiarization with the pros and cons of each will help you match the right style with the particular job at hand. Wet cell batteries. Although wet cell or flooded batteries in their modern form can be traced back to the 1880s, they're still the workhorse of the industry and are considered by many to offer the best value for the money of any battery type. Many improvements have been made over the years, however, its basic form remains the same. Flat lead plates immersed in a liquid sulfuric acid solution. The thickness of these plates and the overall quality of its grids, the plate supports, and case, the actual battery case that holds it all together, play a key role in determining a battery's durability and service life. Wet cell batteries can either have removable caps to add water to the cells lost during the charge-discharge cycle, or they can be of the sealed maintenance-free variety. These maintenance-free varieties simply have a little reservoir of water inside the battery to mitigate loss from overheating or just loss of the electrolyte due to gassing. Despite being old school technology, wet cell batteries offer some attractive advantages over gel cell and AGM batteries. For one, they're cheaper and they have an excellent cost to life cycle ratio, provided they're properly maintained, and they are more tolerant to abuses such as over or undercharging. As to wet cell cons, they don't hold a charge as long as gel cells and AGMs. They're more prone to internal shorting and vibration damage, and they can leak electrolyte if placed at an odd angle or punctured. The fact that they need regular maintenance, the addition of water, is considered by some to be a disadvantage, as the generation of explosive gases while charging, a phenomenon known as gassing, That and the corrosive acid mist accompanying it means proper ventilation is an important consideration for wet sail installations. Gel sail batteries. As many of the negative aspects associated with wet sail batteries involve electrolyte leakage or loss, one goal of early manufacturers was eliminating this free sloshing acid altogether. The electrolyte of gel sailed acid or gel sail batteries is immobilized by adding silica gel to the sulfuric acid solution, creating a more or less solid gelatinous goo that is then placed within a pressurized sealed battery utilizing special valves for venting needs. The result is a truly maintenance-free battery in which the electrolyte can't be spilled due to case damage or tipping over. Another plus in this is both gel cells and AGMs are recumbent batteries, meaning water loss during operation is reclaimed internally. Gel cells also operate equally well in most any position except upside down. Other advantages include virtually no gassing and the ability to hold a charge longer than wet cells. They can also discharge a lot of current and are less susceptible to damage if left in a discharged state. Gel cell battery disadvantages start with cost, which is significantly more than a comparable wet cell battery. They also recharge inefficiently when deeply discharged, as most of the charge current applied during recharging produces heat rather than the chemical process necessary for recharging. This means that they have to be charged at a lower rate, no fast charges, than a wet cell or AGM battery, or the heat produced during overcharging can create permanent voids in the gel, reducing battery capacity. Despite their recombinant design, gel cells can lose water if battery temperature is excessive, such as occurs during improper charging or when used in hotter climates. That's the purpose of those special valves mentioned previously, which are essentially one-way vents designed to release gas in just such situations. As this lost water can't be replaced, extreme cases of excessive venting can result in premature battery failure. Absorbed glass mat, or AGM batteries. The next evolutionary step for lead-acid batteries was AGMs, which utilizes a fiberglass mat to hold the electrolyte in place rather than gelling material. This design is also known as a starved electrolyte construction because the fiberglass mat is only 95% saturated with electrolyte, ensuring there's no excessive acid to leak, even if the case is damaged. AGMs have all the advantages of gel cells with virtually none of their shortcomings. Their plates are more securely packed than wet or gel cells, and construction is so robust they'll survive installations that would literally shake a standard battery to pieces. As there's no liquid to expand, AGM batteries can also survive freezing, and unlike gel cells, their internal resistance is extremely low, meaning almost no battery heating occurs even during heavy charge or discharge cycles. They also have the highest charge acceptance rate, efficiency, and life expectancy to boot. Self-discharge rate is also lower, meaning they can be stored longer without charging than standard batteries, a plus for use on boats that may be left unattended for months at a time. The primary disadvantage associated with AGM batteries is cost, which can be 2 to 3 times that of a comparable wet cell battery. Another would be intolerance to overcharging. So as you can see, proper battery selection is based on a number of considerations, from warranties and construction to initial cost versus life cycle data. Researching and gathering as much information as possible on a prospective battery purchase will always be time well spent. In Battery 101, Part 1, we discuss batteries and their construction. In this article on batteries, which is the second of a 2-part series, we're going to be discussing battery selection based on their job once installed. First up, we're going to be discussing starting batteries. As mentioned earlier, starting batteries are less heavily constructed than deep cycle batteries for one simple reason. They can be. Deep cycle batteries have to supply relatively small amounts of current over an extended period of time, while starting batteries are required to supply a large amount of current for brief periods, normally about 5 seconds. That's where the difference begins. Starting batteries are constructed of thinner, more numerous plates, a design that maximizes surface area and provides the highest burst of current possible, exactly what's needed for cranking an engine. Deep cycle batteries have the thicker and by default fewer plates required to survive prolonged discharges. However, this reduced surface area provides less cranking power, which is why deep cycle batteries have to be oversized when used for starting. What starting batteries are not designed to do is to be deeply discharged. This isn't a problem under normal use, as only a small amount of the battery's actual capacity is used while starting, and that's quickly replaced by the alternator once the engine is running. The thing to remember is that they work just fine when asked to do the job they were designed for, that of cranking the engine. The problems start when they're forced to work as a deep cycle battery and are subjected to the deep discharges associated with them, which causes their thinner plates to buckle and fail rapidly. Even the hardiest starting batteries fail after 15 or so deep discharge cycles, with many self-destructing in as little as 3 or 4. So what should the average boater carry away from this? Well, for starters, my one pun for this article, the realization that standard automotive batteries should be eliminated from all but the most perfunctory applications on board. I know they're cheap and you can pretty much get them anywhere, but despite the similarities in appearance to real marine starting batteries and that heavy-duty label, they're just not built to stand up to the marine environment. Keep them under the hood of your car or truck where they can lead a safe, productive life without causing undue headaches and grief on the water. Deep cycle batteries. Deep cycle is a term chronically misused by battery manufacturers as a sales buzzword to imply a more heavy-duty product. Although any battery can technically be termed a deep cycle, as all can be deeply discharged and recharged, only a true deep cycle battery is designed to withstand such discharges time and time again without premature failure. Cheaper substitutes can suffer irreversible damage after only a few such deep discharge cycles. A true top-of-the-line deep cycle battery has solid lead plates, allowing hundreds of deep discharges up to 80% with no significant reduction in projected service life. Thicker plates are the key to withstanding these deeper discharges, which is why premium deep cycle batteries weigh and cost as much as they do. The reason plate thickness is so critical is due to something called positive grid corrosion, a key factor in battery failure. The positive plates of a battery are eventually eaten away over its service life, meaning all things being equal, the thicker the plates, the longer the battery will last. Unfortunately, most deep cycle marine batteries on the market today utilize lead sponge plates rather than solid lead. These are heavier than what you'd find in a starting battery, but lighter than those of a true deep cycle battery. Golf cart batteries are a popular choice with many boaters from both an economical and reliability standpoint. Although actually a semi-deep cycle battery, they're designed to provide moderate current output for extended periods of time and will outperform any starting battery and most available marine batteries for that matter, but not a true deep cycle battery with solid lead plate. Heavy means more lead, and weight is good as far as batteries are concerned. True deep cycle batteries can be used for both deep cycle and starting, while starting batteries will exhibit poor cycle life in deep cycle applications. When using a deep cycle battery for starting, the general consensus is that it should be 20 to 25% larger than the existing or recommended starting battery in order to provide the required cranking amps. A good oversized deep cycle battery is a better option, in my opinion, than one of those hybrid combination batteries where manufacturers produce this battery they claim can straddle the gap between cranking and deep cycle applications. Some advocates say they're fine for the weekend boater who spends an occasional night away from the dock and his shore power, but how can they meet both the thin plate requirement for a true starting battery and survive the deep discharges that necessitate thicker plates? It's like trying to please folks who like orange juice and sauerkraut by combining the two. The end result is a product combining the limitations of both with the inability to meet the needs of either satisfactorily. An oversized deep cycle battery, especially in single battery applications, also increases deep cycle performance for all the power-sucking, must-have electrical doodads that invariably find their way on board. Additionally, advances such as fuel injection and electronic ignitions have reduced the number of raw cranking amps a battery has to provide anyway, making the deep cycle option even more attractive. The only real caveat I can think of for using deep cycle for cranking might be the need to monitor the battery's state of charge a bit more closely, especially when the engine is started frequently but ran for only short periods of time. Due to design and heavier construction, a deep cycle battery takes significantly longer to fully charge than a starter battery, meaning they may require additional charging in the above scenario. Section E10 of the American Boat and Yacht Council, Standards and Technical Information Reports for Small Craft, covers battery installation requirements in great detail. But we'll touch on the basics here, which are generally the same for all battery types, wet cell, gel cell, or AGM, absorbed glass mat. First off, ABYC requires that all batteries be installed in liquid-tight, acid-proof battery trays or boxes. These are available commercially at most marine supply outlets. However, you can make your own as long as they meet the above requirements. Just make sure that the mounting hardware, the bolts and the screws and such, don't compromise the leak-proof quality of the containers. One thing when you're making these containers or buying the trays or boxes, they do not have to be of a sufficient capacity to hold all of the battery electrolyte, only the amount that may boil over or leak out. Batteries are also required to be secured against movement, 1 inch max in any direction for at least 1 minute, when exposed to 90 pounds of pull or twice the weight of the battery, whichever is less. E10 also requires positive terminals to be covered to prevent accidental shorting from dropped tools, for example, a requirement that can be satisfied by the use of rubber or plastic terminal caps or boots, non-conductive covers, or by the lid of a battery box itself. While batteries should ideally be located in a cool, well-ventilated area, excessive heat can significantly reduce battery life. Many installations place them in the worst possible area in this regard, the engine compartment. If that's the case on your vessel, the best location is usually low in the engine room, but well above the normal accumulation of bilge water, which typically keeps them away from mufflers or exhaust manifolds, while hopefully providing some benefit from the existing engine room ventilation. Adequate ventilation is critical to remove fumes and gases generated while charging. ABYC recommends chargers or other electronics never be installed directly above a battery, as they could be damaged by these corrosive vapors. Other installation problems involve fuel system components. Never install batteries above or below fuel tanks, fuel filters, fuel line fittings, or similar fuel system components. Installation above or below an uninterrupted one-piece non-metallic fuel line is okay. However, any metallic part of the fuel system within 12 inches of a battery terminal must be shielded to prevent sparks. The exact shape of this 12-inch exclusion zone varies slightly between side and top-mounted battery terminals. You want to reference ABYC E10 for the specifics. However, in general, if you can touch both the fuel system component and battery terminal with a 12-inch piece of string, keeping the string taut, it has to be insulated. It's also worth noting that the presence of terminal boots or battery box lids do not fill this requirement, as they're usually removed while servicing the battery, the time sparks are most likely to be generated. Finally, E10 requires battery terminal connections to provide secure mechanical and electrical connections. Spring clips, alligator clamps, and the like are not permitted. The use of wing nuts is also discouraged, as it's difficult to apply enough torque to keep them from loosening. And in my experience, eventually they loosen due to movement of the boat and vibration, and they come loose. So my advice, personal advice, is to remove all of your wing nuts on these primary battery terminal connections and replace them with stainless steel nylock nuts. Death of a battery. While each battery type has their pros and cons, wet cells are the cheapest but require routine maintenance. Gel cells are maintenance-free but are more costly. AGMs are robust enough to survive installations that would literally shake a wet cell battery to pieces, but twice the cost. They all work well if properly installed and maintained. Regardless of which you choose, premature failure is not the normal part of the circle of life, and almost always results from abusive practices or failure to respect construction limitations of the battery itself, typically in the form of poor charging methods or deeper than recommended discharges. If you're not getting 4 to 6 years out of a good set of marine-grade batteries, it's time to step back and see if your battery maintenance philosophy addresses the primary causes of early battery death. First up, sulfation, the silent killer. Each time your battery discharges, soft lead material forms on its plates, a process known as sulfation. Lead sulfate acts as an insulator. Current doesn't flow well through it, and as the accumulation of the plates increase, battery voltage decreases. The good news is sulfation is a normal result of the charge and discharge cycle and is reversed during recharge. This process is not 100% efficient, however, meaning a small amount of sulfate remains on the plates after each charge and discharge cycle. This residual sulfate, while unavoidable, is expected and not a major cause of battery failure. The real problem begins when batteries are left in a discharged state, at which point the lead sulfate begins to harden and crystallize, forming a permanent insulating barrier that can't be removed during normal recharging. Deeper discharges and longer periods between recharges mean increased levels of sulfation, which reduces the battery's ability to charge or discharge, dooming it to an early failure. One reason depleted batteries must be recharged as soon as possible. Other factors affecting battery life: depth of discharge, rate of recharge, and heat. Batteries discharged within the manufacturer's recommendations, typically around 30% of total capacity for wet cell batteries, will last substantially longer than those subjected to discharges deeper than 50%. This recommended maximum depth of discharge can vary greatly between battery types. AGMs can be discharged to a depth of 20% without harm, a key selling point in some cases, as long as they're not subjected to overcharging at higher than recommended voltages. The problem with extreme discharges is that each time it occurs, some of the active material on the battery plates is sloughed off, falling to the bottom of the battery or accumulating between its plates. This cast-off material eventually shorts out the cells, resulting in battery failure. The key to avoiding problems associated with extreme discharge is selecting batteries large enough to meet normal energy requirements while staying within the recommended percentage of discharge. Externally generated heat from engines, engine exhaust systems, or even vessel location, tropical latitudes for example, can also reduce battery life, but internal heat generated while charging can damage batteries as well. Let's talk about battery charging. Battery charging 101. All battery installations require some method of recharging batteries and keeping them topped off, a need typically satisfied by either the engine alternator or, in the case of vessels docked or having AC generators on board, an AC-powered battery charger. Boaters relying solely on alternators, however, particularly sailboats, may be slowly killing their batteries. Many vessels carry multiple banks of large, oversized batteries to provide power while away from the dock. In such cases, unless the owner has upgraded their conventional alternator with a high output model, chances are these batteries never get fully recharged, typically only to around 80 to 90% of capacity, due to the additional engine running time required for lower output alternators to fully charge them. A situation leading to increased sulfation, as it's the last bit of hard charging that helps reduce sulfate accumulation. Most battery installations rely on AC-powered chargers to pump in that last 10 to 20% of charge. Probably the worst thing you can do after carefully selecting a battery is to swing by Bubba's bait shop and grab the first charger you see. Chargers have to be matched to your battery's construction and capacity for maximum service life. Too large a charger can cause battery overheating, while one that's too small can result in excessive sulfation. How battery chargers work. Traditional ferroresonance chargers combine a constant voltage source with tapered charge characteristics and are based on the differences between charging and voltage battery terminal voltage. As battery voltage increases during recharge, charge current decreases. Charge control in more advanced ferroresonance chargers is typically via a sensing circuit or regulator, which either turns off the charger when a preset voltage level is reached or reduces charger output to a float voltage of around 13.8 to 13.5 volts, depending on battery type, once the battery is fully charged. The problems with ferroresonance chargers include generation of high AC ripple, which can also cause internal heating of the battery while charging, and the fact that not all ferroresonance chargers are properly regulated. If the float charge mentioned above remains at the higher charge rate, 14 volts DC or greater, battery electrolyte will eventually boil off or evaporate and need replacing. With wet cell batteries, this means you simply have to top off the electrolyte more often, but in the case of sealed maintenance-free batteries, permanent damage results. In contrast to the above, newer smart chargers divide battery charging into 3 stages: bulk, absorption, and float. This controlled multi-phase approach to charging is both more efficient and battery-friendly. All battery types charge faster and last longer when charged in distinctive phases, particularly when the charger has multiple settings, as all the better ones do, allowing you to select specific battery types to be charged. The other major benefit of this newer technology is that it allows boaters to purchase a battery charger that can be installed and operationally forgotten, all the while keeping your batteries in top condition. Here's how they do it. The bulk stage. This initial stage charges the battery up to 75% of capacity utilizing a limited, controlled high charge current, typically around 30% of the battery's capacity in amp hours. A max of around 14.4 volts for wet cells, 14.2 for gel cells. This controlled use of high charge current both charges the battery quicker and protects it from the damaging effects of excessive high internal charge current and the heat it generates, produced by older chargers. Absorption stage. Once the battery is around 3/4 charged, the absorption stage kicks in, charging the remaining 25% of capacity. Max charge voltages mentioned above remain steady while amperage is slowly reduced until the battery is fully charged. Then we have the float stage. During the float stage charge, voltage drops to 13.5 volts, 13.8 for gel cells, which is below the gassing point, reducing electrolyte loss, but high enough to maintain the battery at full potential for extended periods. Some chargers include a 4th equalization stage, which is essentially a manually controlled overcharge condition aimed at dissolving residual sulfate left on the battery's plates after the normal charge cycle is complete. One important thing to remember, equalization applies to wet cell batteries only, and if required must be done with care to avoid battery damage. Following all manufacturer's instructions while closely monitoring both electrolyte levels and the specific gravity of each battery cell. It's also important to verify all applicable battery system components, wiring for example, is sufficiently robust to handle the equalization charge, which typically peaks at around 16 volts. Charging multiple battery banks. Although most vessels typically have a single permanently installed charger on board to take care of their charging needs, for best results, those with multiple house banks or twin engines with separate batteries should ideally have separate charging systems or a means of splitting the charge to each battery or bank. Newer chargers offer multiple outlets, providing isolated charging outputs for each battery bank. Efficient multi-bank charging only occurs when the batteries comprising each bank are of the same size, type, and age. Duty cycles should also be closely matched. If a battery bank consists of different sized batteries, the smaller will invariably be overcharged, while the larger battery will suffer from chronic undercharging, both of which cause premature battery failure. Finally, when replacing a defective battery that's part of a battery bank, i.e. one connected in series or series parallel with one or more other batteries, the replacement battery should ideally be of the same age and condition as the remaining batteries in that particular bank. For best results, install a good used battery matching the others, or simply replace the entire bank with new ones. And although it goes without saying, I'm going to say it anyway, make sure that the battery is of the same type of the one that you're replacing. In other words, if you have a battery bank with wet cells, don't replace a defective battery with an AGM or a gel cell. All of your batteries, particularly the batteries in the same bank, should be of the same type. All wet cell, all AGM, or all gels. A common problem I see during surveys is a owner that has, let's say he has a wet cell battery for his engine start, and then for his house bank batteries, he's got AGMs. But he only has one charger charging everything. Well, the problem with that is that Unless the battery charger has the capability to charge different types of batteries. In other words, it has one leg can charge AGM and the other leg can charge wet cell. One of those batteries, or one of those types, either the wet cell or the AGM, are not going to be charged at the proper voltage because they have different ideal charge voltages. So, in a perfect world, you keep all of your batteries of the same type, and then you don't have to worry about overcharging or undercharging the batteries.